Good morning to everyone here in church and on Zoom. Just in case anyone doesn't know me, my name's Karen Davis and I'm the Safeguarding Officer for St Paul's and St Mary's. Today, Alex and I are taking this opportunity to inform and inspire, I hope, by devoting this morning's service to the vitally important subject of safeguarding. Now, I've been safeguarding officer here for longer than I care to remember, probably more than 17 years now. I think the fact that I'm a GP helped me to take on the challenge, as I'm already trained and experienced in the medical and the clinical aspects of safeguarding children and vulnerable adults. But safeguarding in church, however, has other strands to incorporate. And over the years, the role has expanded and developed, rightfully so, to become an extremely important part of how we look after and care for our parishioners and our community. Protecting children and vulnerable people is at the very heart of our Christian message. And Safeguarding Sunday is all about creating an opportunity for us in our churches to show our communities that we all take this responsibility seriously. Throughout the Bible, we are given hundreds of examples of God's heart for vulnerable people and the expectations he places upon communities and societies as to how we should respond to and treat people who are vulnerable or voiceless. If we want our places of worship to be safe places, then it is absolutely vital that this is talked about by us all, but especially by our leaders leading from the front. The scope of safeguarding has grown enormously, and as well as encompassing all the various types of abuses, emotional or psychological, physical, sexual, financial, spiritual, domestic, discrimination and neglect. In this digital age, we must also include grooming, trafficking, and modern slavery. This is a hugely complex subject, and I'm sure we can understand why training is mandated for all our leaders, PCC members, and volunteers in the church. The diocese has an excellent training resources available via their website. And if any of you are not able to access the training, then that's something that Alex and I can facilitate here with our computers. The diocese has an excellent safeguarding team who are extremely supportive, and I've developed a good relationship with them over the years. I'm the Deanery Safeguarding Representative for Epsom, and I joined the Diocesan Safeguarding Advisory Panel about 18 months ago as a parish representative. There's a real drive at the diocese for fostering a culture of safeguarding and prevention, and looking at how to integrate this into our churches and our church life. The advisory panel has enlisted the skills of lots of external agencies to help and support best practice in approaching this very important subject. In order to achieve a safer culture, we need to listen well, learn more, and be led well. Some of you may know that in the last few years, the Church of England commissioned a root and branch review of how the church has managed previous safeguarding cases. And on the 5th of October last year, the Past Cases Review 2 report was published. This was a major piece of work and probably one of the most significant reports on safeguarding published in many years. One might have thought it would have been headline news, but with all that was going on in this country and the world, it was rather swept aside. It makes for very sad and difficult reading, with multiple failures to protect vulnerable people. There are still huge challenges, but safeguarding remains absolutely central to our core beliefs. There's no doubt that safeguarding practices are vastly improved, but we must not be complacent. Safeguarding continues to be everyone's responsibility in the church and community, particularly as one of the recommendations from the independent report into child sexual abuse is that reporting of abuse should be mandatory for professionals and for those in positions of responsibility. Statistically, we know that there will be a number of survivors of abuse in our congregations and that some of our content might be triggering. Please, if there is anything you are concerned about with regard to safeguarding, either in relation to yourselves, for any children or vulnerable adults, please speak to either Alex or myself. Don't sit on it or investigate it yourself, but come and speak to us if you're at all worried. And please remember that every one of us has the potential to be vulnerable in certain situations. Safeguarding has been a real challenge for the church in general over recent years, and we should know that it is core to our business. It's God's business, so as your safeguarding officer, it's my business, the PCC's business, and in fact, everyone's business as a shared responsibility. We all need to listen and keep our eyes open. We can see evidence throughout the Bible of God safeguarding his people, being a defender and protector, wanting the very best for us and all creation. So as a church, we will endeavour to continue to provide a safe environment for all our parishioners and our community, making sure that we review and update as often as is necessary. Psalm 46 begins, God is our strength and refuge, our very present help in time of trouble. This verse helps to sustain me as I continue in my safeguarding role. Thank you.
This is our second Safeguarding Sunday we've held in our parish, and it's really important. And we are encouraged by the Church of England and the diocese, but we also think it's a good idea to do this every year, just once a year, to remind ourselves of this important topic. Thank you again to Karen. I don't know how many parishes have someone who has done this role for 17 years. First of all, for St Paul's, or over 17 years possibly, first of all for St Paul's and then for both St Paul's and St Mary's. Karen brings a lot of expertise, and it is such a blessing to have that role filled so well. Now, if you think about the word safeguarding, I think some of us will have different reactions to it. Some of us, it might leave us a little bit just like, oh, safeguarding, that's mentioned a lot. Or some of us might be thinking, oh no. Some of us might be thinking, not again. Some of us might be thinking, this is a bit uncomfortable. It's a tricky topic. You may be surprised, some of you, to know that Karen and I had messages after the last Safeguarding Sunday from people saying thank you so much for raising these issues in church. So this is very significant for all of us, and for some of us really, really, really important indeed. Unfortunately, in this day and age, the word safeguarding conjures up memories of times, as Karen was talking about, when the church collectively has got things really wrong, and it's been all over the press. Church of England getting things wrong, the Catholic Church getting things wrong. A lot of times, victims of abuse have been failed by the church, either by failing to prevent harm in the first place, which is why we do all the things we're trying to do in the parish, or by failing to hear people when they have tried to raise issues about things that have happened. The Church of England has a long way to go with putting this right. Most churches have a long way to go with putting this right. Safeguarding is more important than ever at this time. There's a lot of stringent policies therefore being put into place, and there are a lot of things that Karen and I receive all the time from the diocese, and a group of you recently updated your safeguarding training because we heard that those were the people who needed to do it, and now we've got some more people who need to do it. It's a bit the nature of the topic. We're never finished with safeguarding, so if you receive some emails in the next couple of weeks, please would you attend to them quickly for us. In the parish, we have about 50, probably more now, volunteers who have a DBS check. Karen revises those regularly. We're doing those quicker than we used to. So if you feel like yours has come around faster, it probably has, because they've changed the regulations. It used to be 5 years and now it's 3 years. So we're doubling up all our paperwork. Karen also checks all our risk assessments when we review them. She comes around the buildings with Michelle and I, looking at them to see what we think could be risky to people. All of our different activities and events, Karen looks at those risk assessments, and a lot of our policies as well, where safeguarding links. We liaise between us with the diocese on certain issues. There's often things that come to us which are not like a major concern, but they're like a query. And sometimes we go to the diocese and say, this has happened, is this something we need to worry about? Most times they say, no, nothing to worry about, or they show us what we need to do that might help somebody. As Karen said, please do report anything, small or large, that you think may be concerning to either one of us, and we will share it with the other one. Really important not to try and investigate yourselves, but to hand things to us. And we will work things out. You may not actually ever know what then happened with the query you bring. We may not be able to tell you, but you have to trust us that we're doing all the things we're told to. So what is safeguarding at its core? Well, it doesn't appear, the word safeguarding doesn't appear in the Bible, but in the Bible we're given lots and lots of examples of God's heart for vulnerable people, and the expectations he places on communities and societies in how we should respond to and treat anyone who falls into that category. And of course we need to remember we can all be a vulnerable person. I'm not vulnerable standing before you today, but I have at times been a vulnerable person when I've been ill in the past, or other times of life. We can all go through phases of being vulnerable in our lives, and some of us we know are more vulnerable than others as well. There are many verses, passages and themes which leave us in no doubt as to God's feelings and thoughts on the subject. In Proverbs chapter 31 verse 8, Sue read for us, it said, "Speak up for those who cannot speak for themselves, for the rights of all who are destitute." And that's at the heart of safeguarding. It's really important we're all vigilant. We're keeping an eye not just on our church family, the people who come to join us in our buildings for our different activities, and the people we know in our parish as well. Looking out for the needs of the vulnerable, ensuring that their needs are met with love and compassion. Speaking up for those in need if they're unable to speak for themselves. So safeguarding is about protecting vulnerable people and promoting healing and justice for people who have been harmed. It is about the rules and the regulations and the checks and procedures, because those are part of what help us to stay safe, but it's a lot more than that as well. Safeguarding is about promoting fullness of life for all people, and especially people amongst us who need extra love and care. In Matthew chapter 18, Jesus uses a child as an example to his disciples, that unless they change and become like little children, they'll never enter the kingdom of heaven. His attitude to children was revolutionary at the time. It was affectionate and respectful in a culture that devalued children. And in that reading that Sue read, the second reading, Jesus warns of the dangers of causing one of these little ones who believe in him to sin. Now, when he talks about little ones, Jesus is maybe talking about little children, what he is in that reading, but it could also be applied to anyone who is vulnerable and could be led by somebody else. So the consequences for this, it says in the Bible, are very severe. We talk a lot, all of us, about being one family all together in St Mary's and St Paul's. And that is really important. We're born into our physical families, but we have a spiritual family, the family of God. And it's the best thing. It's amazing that God designed us to operate like this in family together. Family is God's idea. Being in relationships and community is part of the image of God shown in the Trinity, and also in the way that Jesus drew so close to his disciples, his smaller family of followers who he spent so much time with on earth. Family is important. It tells us it's not good to be alone in the Bible. In Genesis chapters 1 to 2, we see a picture of a family in paradise. But in Genesis chapters 3 to 4, we see a picture of a family falling into trouble. Paradise is lost, and Adam and Eve are banished from the Garden of Eden. Relationships become distorted, and humanity is broken. Family is torn by conflict, jealousy, rage, and murder. But we can be encouraged because God cares about families and he cares about people. In the Isaiah reading, it said, "Can a mother forget the baby at her breast and have no compassion on the child she has born? Though she may forget, I will not forget you. See, I have engraved you on the palms of my hands. Your walls are ever before me." God wants our churches to be places where people can discover the joy of living in harmony with him and our fellow human beings and with the whole of creation. Churches need to be places of unconditional love, places of safety and security, places of growth and development, excuse me everybody, places of forgiveness and healing. Being a place of safety for children and young people, for vulnerable adults, and indeed for us all, for, as I said, we can all at times be vulnerable, requires a deep commitment from each of us. Bishop Jonathan Gibbs, thank you ever so much, thank you. Bishop Jonathan Gibbs, Bishop for Safeguarding in the Church of England, reminds us that safeguarding is related to many of the challenges we're facing in today's world. If you think about our world today, we've got issues of racial justice, of prejudice, of deprivation, of inequality. Even the climate emergency is threatening everybody's lives, and in many countries people are displaced and very much more at risk because of this. If you think back to the beginning of Jesus' public ministry on earth and his reading from the book of Isaiah in the synagogue of Nazareth in Luke chapter 4, he says, "The Spirit of the Lord is on me because he has anointed me to proclaim good news to the poor. He has sent me to proclaim freedom for the prisoners and recovery of sight for the blind, to set the oppressed free." If we look at our world today, these words have even greater significance now, and even greater following our experience of COVID, of war in places across the world, and the current economic crisis, which is really making people, even in our local area, which is a relatively deprived area, struggle. Jesus was in the business of releasing people from captivity and bringing God's favour and blessing to those who've been oppressed. And this is what he calls his church to do also. We are to be those who, in Jesus' name, bring God's healing and liberation to the world around us, enabling people to experience God's fullness of life in harmony with God, with each other, and with creation. We are called to be people who weep when other people weep, including those who've been affected by abuse in any way. We're called to be people who rejoice with those who rejoice as well. Most of all, as people begin to discover the healing love of Jesus Christ. Our churches, we should aim to be places of sanctuary, open to people who seek solace, to seek kind of the peace within our walls. An example of that here, we have Little Roots on Tuesday mornings. We've now got around 50 people when you count the adults and the children coming on Tuesdays, and they see it as a place of sanctuary. They might not verbalise it like that, but they come and they relax within the space, and they have social time together. They hear about God from Michael as he does the Bible stories. It's beautiful, but those people are seeking sanctuary within our walls. We should also be places where people work together for the good of all and for the transformation of the world, for the sake of the poor, the vulnerable, the oppressed, whether as a result of racial injustice, as I said, abuse, prejudice, deprivation, or other causes. My prayer is that God may draw us by our hearts to ways that we can do more to help in these areas. My prayer is that God may richly bless us as we share in Jesus' important work of bringing freedom, healing, and peace to those around us. Amen.